Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022, and in just 6 days, we will be hitting the 2022 midterm elections. It's a countdown to an extremely exciting election where Democrats and Republicans are going to be facing off against each other in a number of races, but extremely important ones, such as the congressional ones, which ultimately is driving this video talking about the United States Senate elections. Today, the Democratic Party stands at a 50-seat majority. What that means is that they are tied with the Republican Party in the U.S. Senate, but per the United States Constitution, the vice president should break that tie. And in that tie, we find the Democrats to be in a position where they are in a point where they cannot lose a singular seat. The 50-50 tie, the advantage that they have is technically 51-50 because of the vice president, but as soon as you lose that majority, it's not as if the Republicans would be losing the majority should they win an additional seat from what they already have. So the stakes are high for both parties. It's expected to be a red wave in more ways than one, so that means the Republicans also have some pretty high expectations for themselves. Not exactly something that I would say should be really on the table in terms of high expectations, but the Republican Party definitely should be counting on at least some level of victories this upcoming November election night. And the reason why I say that is because not only are these Senate elections going to be occurring, but also congressional, gubernatorial, state level. The Republican Party will undoubtedly have some pickups from the Democratic Party. But the question is, does that happen in the Senate? Does that happen in the House? Does that happen on the governor level? I'm nearly sure it'll happen on the governor and House level, but the Senate actually is quite an interesting, quite an interesting point. Right now, I will say that the Democrats and Republicans are about even in terms of their chances at the majority, which is just so happens to be where we are in the current Senate makeup. 50-50 is nearly exactly what our odds are telling us for the race. But ultimately, what you will see at the end of this video is that there is, in fact, an advantage for one side of the aisle. That advantage does, sort of become clearer and clearer as we get through the remainder of the video. So let's go ahead and take a look at where we are right now. What I have characterized for you all are our safe states for both sides of the aisle. What this means essentially is that these states are entirely out of reach for the opposition party. They will absolutely 1000% go to the Democrats and Republicans respectively. There is no chance that the Democrats or Republicans lose these states. 44 to 45, some of which are not up for re-election this time around. Every Senate election every 2 years is only a third of the Senate actually up, so it goes by classes. It's a whole system there, but point being, Democrats and Republicans are safe in these respective states. Now, amongst the remaining 11 that we have to talk about, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, New Hampshire. The reason why I listed them out is because I wanted you to think back to 2020, to 2018, to 2016. Do you see any unfamiliar states? And the answer, quite frankly, should be no. These are all states that were decided by single digits in the 2016 election. They are all states that were decided in most part by single digits, except for the state of Colorado in the 2020 election. And these are all states that have been competitive for the past couple of election cycles, with the exception of Arizona and Georgia. These are states that were pretty solid for Mitt Romney and John McCain. But beyond that, these are states that we generally have an understanding to be competitive, and they have been in many ways on the Senate level. And looking at where we are, we have states that we can characterize as likely blue and likely red, simply because they are quite Republican or quite Democrat, but the margins here don't exactly tell us that it's 100 and 1000% locked up compared to a safe state that otherwise might be. The first example of this will be the state of Iowa, where we have Chuck Grassley, the incumbent Republican senator from this state, running for re-election. He's been in the U.S. Senate since 1981, so he's been serving for quite some time now, and should he win this term, will go on to be, should he serve out the full term, he will be the oldest and longest reigning senator in United States history. The state of Iowa is one where Chuck Grassley has been extremely involved in politics, though it looks like voters are a little bit less inclined to vote for him this time around. It's expected to be his narrowest of all of his elections in his entire electoral history, which means that there is some type of pushback away from the voters, but it's not enough to say that he ultimately ends up losing this race. We're thinking about a 7 to 8 point race in favor of the GOP. As we look down to the next state that will be characterized as likely, we have the state of Florida, where Marco Rubio just simply is a stellar candidate. He does well amongst minority groups. He does well amongst older and younger voters. He does well amongst the overall electorate. And in 2016, he outperformed Donald Trump by winning 8 points across the state when Donald Trump was only winning by 1, which meant there were absolutely, 1,000%. I'm liking using that term for some reason. Hillary Clinton, Marco Rubio voters, those people absolutely existed and they voted. in that election. And it happened because Marco Rubio was so well liked, so well received by the state. And now he goes on to a year that is technically just as good, if not better, for the national Republicans than 2016. Florida is a likely red state. There's no other way to put it. It might even be safe Republican at this point in time. But overall, I'd say I'm comfortable based off of previous margins to say Florida is likely red. Now, this isn't to say the Democrats don't have their own states that are considered to be likely. Well, they do have one singular state, and they also do have an additional state, which I will cover in just a moment. But the first state that I would say, or the next state I would characterize as likely, is the state of Colorado. This is one where I think the Democratic Party is in a position where they could win Colorado by anywhere above 5 to 15 points. I say this because Michael Bennet did so back in 2016. He outperformed Hillary Clinton. He ran for president in 2020. He's well received, well liked across the state. It also helps that Jared Polis, the incumbent Democratic governor, is also going to be carrying a lot of down-ballot Democrats across the finish line with him. Jared Polis is extremely popular. He's doing well. He's on track to win by double digits. We cannot say the exact same for Michael Bennet, but we think he's going to get close. It also helps that Donald Trump lost this state in 2016, also lost it in 2020 by 13.5%, a 14-point margin of victory for President Biden. That in itself should speak for itself, but the state of Colorado right now is a likely blue state. That brings the Democrats to 46. Amongst the remaining states, we have 8 total quote-unquote toss-ups, but we now have a new state that we can include in the likely column for the Republican Party. That is the state of North Carolina. Now, I might get some pushback for this call, but I will say, as what we have seen across the nation is a national and universal rightward shift. Whether that means in generic ballot, whether that means in Biden approval, whether that means in statewide elections, the Republican Party is undoubtedly better now than they were a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and it is happening all across the country. We don't have new data from the state of North Carolina, but I can infer from the lead that Ted Budd already had of 4 to 5 points that, based off of historical knowledge, there is an underestimation of Republican support in North Carolina just off the base level, in addition to the more recent shift in favor of the Republican Party. I am most comfortable characterizing North Carolina as a likely red state. Unfortunately for the Democrats, I am no longer comfortable characterizing it as a lean red state. So, with North Carolina there, Colorado there, Iowa, and Florida there as well, these are states where we have a very good idea of where they're going and can pretty much count on both parties winning in their respective states. But in the final remaining 7 races, these are the ones that really are going to make or break the congressional majority for Democrats in the Senate, and they are extremely competitive. Realistically, I could see these races going in either direction: 54 for the GOP, 53 for the Democrats. I realistically could see a point where Democrats win all of these, Republicans win all of these, or a combination of both, which is what I think is likeliest. But all of these states are competitive enough that at this point in time, they are really competitive. They are really toss-ups and could go either way. But some definitely more than others. I will say that what we are going to move into next is our lean characterization, where we can say with at least somewhat confidence that we expect one party to win in these states. The first state I will characterize is the state of New Hampshire, where Maggie Hassan currently leads on polling average by about a point, which is in itself quite surprising, I should say, because Maggie Hassan is a pretty good candidate, at least on Real Clear Politics. On 538, she leads by about 3 points. I will say, though, that Don Baldock is not exactly this stellar GOP candidate that I thought the Republican Party really wanted to field in this state. Chris Sununu was an option. Kelly Ayotte was an option. Both of them turned down the race, largely because they didn't want to be in Washington again or for the first time, in addition to the fact that maybe Maggie Hassan wasn't someone who was going to be quote-unquote easily beatable. However, what I will say is that the national environment has certainly shifted in favor of the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, enough so that New Hampshire is in fact competitive. I will say that this 3-point margin is not something that Democrats should be happy about. Looking back at past elections, though, it's not exactly something that really strikes me as super inaccurate. In the presidential general election, Joe Biden was supposed to win by 11. He ended up winning by 7, though she leads by 3, and that would technically shift it away. I will also point out the fact that New Hampshire was a state that was quite accurate when it came down to the overall percentage that Joe Biden got, not necessarily the margin. So as of right now, I will say Maggie Hassan, I still think, has the advantage in the Senate race, but is certainly not as in the advantage as she was before. This used to be a likely blue state on my older map. Moving over to the next state that I will characterize, we have a lean red state out of the state of Wisconsin. This is one where the GOP currently maintains an advantage with Senator Ron Johnson. I don't know exactly how much I buy that this state's going to be likely. I did think about it for a moment, but I also recognize that Ron Johnson is extremely unpopular, and while he has gotten lucky in the past, even in 2016, he won it by a lean margin. I think Mandela Barnes has suffered a lot of attacks that have been very effective by the Republican Party, and ultimately I will say lean Republican is the fairest characterization that I can give it at this point in time. The next state I will characterize in the lean Republican column is also the state of Ohio. This is one where the GOP currently has a Republican incumbent, Rob Portman, in the state. In addition to that, J.D. Vance is not the best candidate by far, but is a Republican. Nonetheless, this is a state that Donald Trump won in both 2016 and 2020 by 8 points. It's one of the very few states where you did not see a shift whatsoever across the entire state from 2016 to 2020, which meant that voters, as much as they were shifting to Biden on the national level, did not shift in Ohio. In fact, one could argue that Trump won more of the vote in 2020 than 2016, not necessarily by percentage, but the ability to overcome the shift on the left on the national level. In fact, not seeing a shift whatsoever meant that Trump, in fact, expanded his base from 2016. But right now, I would say Ohio is a lean red state simply because the Democrats have a stellar candidate, stellar candidate. Tim Ryan is a great one. He is one who's able to fundraise, mobilize, engage, etc. But ultimately, fundamentals play in a role, and Ohio is still a red state. The next state I'm going to characterize is the state of Arizona, which is a lean blue state on my map. I will say Blake Masters has been playing catch-up across the state. Carrie Lake also has been somewhat expanding her lead across the gubernatorial race, but at the same time, the Senate race is very different. Mark Kelly is a strong candidate. Blake Masters is not. Blake Masters is disliked. Mark Kelly is not. So the state of Arizona right now is one that the Democrats, I think, are in the advantage. I definitely could see Mark Kelly winning this on election night, but I will caution everyone in saying that a lean characterization is not a super confident one. It's one that says, I believe this is how this is going to go, but it is not saying without a doubt it is going to go this way. So if Arizona was to go red, yes, I'm wrong in my characterization, but it's not out of the question. Same thing if Democrats win in Wisconsin and Ohio. So lean blue for the state of Arizona. The next state we are going to characterize is going to bring the Republican Party to be in the Republican 50 that they are currently in right now. And that, in fact, is the state of Pennsylvania. I moved it over to tilt red last week, and it was something that not many of you guys actually agreed with that decision. And on one front, I see the argument. I entirely understand that John Fetterman has been leading throughout the entire state, and that Dr. Oz just simply seems too much of a meme to actually end up being the Senate nominee, to be the senator from the state of Pennsylvania. But think about the way that we thought about Donald Trump. Think about the way that we thought about numerous other candidates, including ones like Herschel Walker, where yes, there is a pushback from voters. I mean, John Fetterman should not be in a position where he could even win the state of Pennsylvania, given our national environment. Same thing with Warnock in Georgia. But at the same time, I will say that Dr. Oz has gotten better over the past month, campaigned better. The debate was a disaster for the Democratic Party. I don't think it has much of an impact on the overall electorate as much as we might think, but I do think there was an overall shift. I think it happened on the national level. It was just combined with bad circumstances following the debate, and Pennsylvania right now, I think Dr. Oz is the favorite, and I will say a lean Republican characterization is what I am most comfortable characterizing on our Senate map. So that brings us to 50 to 48. Do the Democrats get any final victories? We'll talk about that, but we have another state to characterize in favor of the Republican Party, and that is the state of Nevada. Now, I currently have it at tilt Republican. I think that's the fairest that I can characterize it as such. I am a bit, in a way, cheating because I'm looking at the early vote numbers from Nevada that are very good indicators about the firewall that Democrats will have going into Election Day. Turnout is extremely low, contrary to other states. In fact, some states are outpacing and outperforming their 2018 turnout, which is very, very exciting, but Nevada is not. Not by far. And I think that something is telling me that Democrats and Republicans in this state don't seem to be too engaged, at least in the early vote in person or vote by mail, which may just be a product of distrust for the system itself. But Democrats routinely seem to trust it a lot more than Republicans, and that's where they build up this firewall. Democrats do, though, however, do have a firewall, one that could resist a red wave on Election Day, or at least a red surge in vote count, but also at the same time, there has been a shift across the nation, a shift that has moved away from the Democratic Party. It's a state that Biden won by 2.4. It's a state that Clinton won by 2.4. It's one that also will likely be lost by the by the Democrats, at least as it stands right now, simply because of how close it was in the last election, on top of the fact the Democrats have lost ground with Latino voters, lost ground with all types of voters across the country, but specifically Latino and Hispanic voters from Florida to Arizona to Nevada to Texas, across the country, Sunbelt region and out. The Democrats have lost ground amongst minority voters, specifically Latino and Hispanic voters, and we find that to be very, very apparent. So Nevada is a tilt red state. It looks lean. Just by comparison, it's not lean, it's tilt. It's very close, could go either direction. Truly one of the most competitive states this time around. But Nevada is a state that I believe will go to the Republicans, at least right now with 6 days to go. And in the final state I'm going to characterize, we have the state of Georgia. Now, this honestly was a very, very difficult call. I don't deny that this is a state where the Democratic Party has been doing very well when it comes down to the news coverage, when it comes down to the stories. Right now, though, 538 has Herschel Walker in the advantage, and it's very interesting, if you ask me, about what has been happening across Georgia. For some reason, voters simply do not care about Herschel Walker scandals to the extent that they might care in another state. It doesn't seem to be something that is impacting Herschel Walker too much. In fact, he's improved in polls based off of where we were a month ago. And that leads my decision into thinking that we will head into a runoff election. I think we will head to a runoff in Georgia, and that's where that race will go, and it will be decided by a December runoff election. But at the same time, Georgia is one that can be decided on election night, but if it is decided, I think the Democrats get a victory. I think if it's a runoff, Democrats also get a victory, and I think it'll be easier in the runoff election. The reason being, the Democrats will invest all of their remaining funds and resources and energy and engagement into that state, because they did it before, and they can absolutely do it again. They know what to do in Georgia. They know how to win. They've done it as recently as a year ago with the same candidate that is on the ballot this time, who outperformed every other Democrat, including President Biden. But there also is the possibility that Democrats lose Georgia outright, or they lose it in the runoff. I think it's a very real possibility. I don't think it's the likeliest outcome. I disagree with 538 on this front. I have Georgia as a tilt blue state, but ultimately it's extremely, extremely competitive. So in our final Senate map, we're 51-49 in favor of the Republican Party. Nevada flips, Pennsylvania stays, Ohio stays, Wisconsin stays. Democrats lose the state of Nevada. In return, they pick up nothing. Before, we talked about Democrats potentially picking up Pennsylvania, potentially even Wisconsin. At that point, no. It's all gone. The Democrats are just retaining what they have right now. They're playing defense. Hold on to Georgia, hold on to Arizona, hold on to New Hampshire. Quite impressive in terms of a showing, but they lose Nevada, and consequently, they lose the Senate majority. So as it stands today, 51-49, Republicans in the advantage. A big shift from where we were a month, 2, and 3 months ago. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Sorry, tomorrow.